How do you know if you are in a dry spell or have a dead bedroom? And what do you do about it? Now, let's start off with some loose definitions. And I say loose because there aren't specific definitions for these terms. They aren't official or clinical, but are more colloquial terms to identify common experiences. So if you can use them, great. If they don't feel helpful for you, that's totally fine too. We're talking more about the experience. It's not as much of what you call it, but what do you do when you find yourself in similar situations? Hey there, I'm Consul. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and ASEX certified sex therapist, here to help you have more secure and satisfying sex and relationships. A dry spell is usually a temporary period where sexual activity decreases. Now, this could be due to stress, busy schedules, health issues, or phase of life where you have like little kids or you're moving or something else is going on. The key thing here is that both partners are still interested in each other and reviving their sexual intimacy. There's an understanding that this is a phase and there's a willingness to work through it. Partners are acknowledging the dry spell and are continuing to talk about emotional and physical intimacy. There's still a sense of hopefulness about being able to revive sexual intimacy because partners recognize that this is a phase. On the other hand, a dead bedroom is typically where there's very little or no sexual intimacy that has become a chronic issue. This isn't just a temporary lull or something that the partners can point to as saying, oh, this makes sense because we're in this phase. It just kind of becomes life. It's this prolonged period, and it's often accompanied by feelings of frustration, rejection, and emotional distance between the partners. In this dead bedroom, usually one or both partners may lose interest in sex entirely or feel really disconnected from their partner, often emotionally as well as physically. And this is often something that's either not discussed, unacknowledged, or it's a very difficult topic for the partners to discuss. It doesn't feel like they're on the same team when they're talking about it. It feels like they are fighting each other rather than together fighting this issue or recognizing that this is something that's happening for both of them, but they still feel like they're on the same team. And it can often feel more hopeless that things will change because there's so much tension around it, difficulty, and not feeling like a team around this issue. It's also really important to note that there is no one measuring stick of how often you should be intimate with your partner or what is healthy. You will find things online that say certain things, but really each partnership has to decide for themselves. Because if I shared with you how often one partnership that I worked with was having sex, you might say, whew, that is a lot of sex. And someone else may look at that same partnership, how often they are having sex, and would say, oh my gosh, that is not nearly enough sex, because it's relative. Similarly, your desire level is relative. To one partner in your life, you may have a high desire, and to another partner in your life, you may have a low desire. And it's not because anything has changed with you. You are the same partner, you may have the same amount of desire, but in comparison to your partner, you may be higher or lower with your sexual desire or libido. And for some partners, there may be no sexual intimacy at all. I've worked with lots of partners who have intentionally chosen not to include sexual intimacy in the relationship, and that's because it works for them. Now, I wouldn't call that a dead bedroom because it's an intentional choice that works for them, that they've discussed. They feel like they're on the same team about it. So ultimately, it's not about comparing yourselves to others, but about looking within the relationship and what each of you want and what works for you guys. Now, what do you do if you're in a dry spell? First, it's important to acknowledge and continue to communicate about it. Acknowledging something keeps it at the forefront of each of your minds. This doesn't mean nagging or making the other person feel bad or that you need to do this on a daily basis. You don't want to add extra guilt, shame, or blame around physical intimacy. Acknowledgement is more about validating for yourself and your partner that, hey, this is hard right now, or this is something that neither of us really want and that we would like to work on it. So this might sound something like snuggling up to your partner at night purely for snuggles and saying, I really love connecting with you when we snuggle. I want to plan a date next month where we can connect with each other without distraction. Or it may sound like, I know we haven't been able to be as sexually intimate as we both would like. It's been a really stressful few months, and I would love to still find ways that feel good for both of us to connect during this time without adding to our plates, since it's going to be a few more months of high stress. It can also be helpful to create a menu of sexual, physical ways to connect. So often people focus on orgasm and intercourse, especially for cisgender heterosexual partners, and that can be really limiting. Now, there's nothing wrong with enjoying intercourse and orgasm, of course, but it is just one item on a long menu of physical and sexual connection opportunities. Now, if you are able to identify more ways for you to connect and expand your definition of sex, you guys can continue to have sex or find ways to be sexual without it having to fall into this narrow category, which can open up opportunities. It's also important to create safety around non-sexual physical intimacy. So often I hear one partner say that they don't want to engage or show interest in non-sexual physical intimacy, like hugging or touching or receiving a massage, because they worry that their partner will expect or assume that it will then lead to sex. So they just back off. Or one partner may not initiate non-sexual physical intimacy because they feel they've been rejected a lot, or they're afraid their partner going to feel pressure, which this is unfortunate because both partners are wanting non-sexual physical intimacy but are afraid to do it. So creating some safety around this can really help you guys still connect physically. This may look like you guys coming up with a code phrase. I like this idea of saying we're just simmering. It gives the imagery of keeping a pot simmering on the stove without the expectation that it's going to boil over into sex. This may look like you coming up to your partner and saying, hey, I'd love to give you a massage tonight. We're just gonna simmer. Having that pre-established language can help you guys both know, oh, I can say yes to this. I can enjoy this. I can relax into the massage because there's no expectation of sex. Now, if you do this though, you have to honor that if you say it's just simmering, that you guys are not going to then have sex. We want to create that safety around that boundary. Also find things that move the needle. While daily hugs are wonderful and I highly encourage them, these can feel like sometimes small drops in the bucket. So instead, find one thing that will help move the connection needle and then prioritize that. Now, this doesn't have to be overwhelming. Maybe it's a date night once a month rather than the pressure of weekly, but something that's going to help fill your buckets rather than just a few drips at a time. Another tool is scheduling physical intimacy time. This isn't scheduling sex necessarily, but it's about scheduling time that you guys are going to be physically close together. And if sex happens, great. If not, great. But it's time that you guys can dedicate to each other. You don't want the expectation of sex because that can create pressure and expectations. And depending on where you're at, you may want to just take sex off the table so you guys can both relax into it. But it's really about creating this dedicated time to stay connected with each other. This can build excitement. When you prioritize this and put it on your calendar, it says this is important to you. And when you follow through with that, that can really help you and your partner build that trust and connection. Now, what if you're in a dead bedroom situation? It's going to be key to open up the lines of communication. And if you're struggling to do this on your own, it can be really helpful to work with a sex therapist to do this, or you can start trying things on your own to open up those lines of communication. Now, you have to communicate about what's happening for each of you, what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what your wants and hopes are for your physical intimacy, and what's getting in the way of that. Communication really is going to be the priority here rather than trying to physically connect first. Now, if you haven't been having sex for a while, it may also feel awkward to get back into it. So go slow, get to know each other again. Even if it's just been a few months of not having sex, it can feel a little bit awkward. You can use different tools to start kind of turning on that part of your brain together again without the pressure of jumping right into sex. So this might be listening to short erotic stories together, having one of you read aloud an erotic story to the other, viewing some erotic material that you guys both like, or just doing things that start to turn that part of your brain on, giving a sensual massage to the other person. Things that create safety around this without the pressure of diving right into the deep end of sex. Let me know what you guys think about a dry spell versus a dead bedroom in the comments below.